Today, I'd like to talk about the new Act on Organ Transplantation in Japan. In Japan, the Act on Organ Transplantation was revised and went into full effect on July 17th. In this new act, the regulations about organ transplantation from brain dead patients were relaxed, so it brought hope to Japanese organ transplantation. However, the new act has some problems because the new act rebels from the viewpoint that benefits people who want to receive a transplant. So, there was not sufficient discussion of the rights and responsibilities of the organ donors and their families, and there was not sufficient support from society. Before the Act on Organ Transplantation was revised, Japan had a serious problem about the shortage of organ donors. So, for people who wanted to receive a transplant, to go abroad was an important way to save their lives. But the situation became more serious. Going abroad for receiving a transplant encountered difficulties. In 2008, the Transplantation Society argued that treatment for patients from outside the country only acceptable if it does not deprive the opportunity of its own population to be provided transplant services. After this declaration, the morality of traveling abroad for organ transplantation became an issue in questions, and traveling abroad for receiving a transplant started to be viewed with suspicion in many countries. These situations motivate people facing with these problems to call for revising the Act on Organ Transplantation. As the supporters of revising the law desired, the Act on Organ Transplantation was revised in 2009. There are three notable changes. First of all, the new act accepted the idea of presumed consent. It means people have the default assumption to prefer to donate their organs for transplantation after their death. It allows transplant from brain dead patients without written consent. The other thing is that the Rights Act enables transplanting organs from brain dead patients who are under 15 years old. It means it becomes not necessary to go abroad for children who want to receive heart, liver, lung, and some other kind of organs in order to save their lives. Also, the number of donors expected to increase these two revised criteria for determining donors. The new act introduced changes not only for donors but also families. In order to implement the two changes of the organ donors criteria, patient family came to play an important role. Under the new act, if patients' will are unclear, patients should patient's family should decide whether patient's organs are donated or not. But there is a problem. Does the new act really respect the rights of organ donors or their families? Now, in terms of problems of the new act, first to be considered is the problem of presumed consent. The idea of presumed consent will allow harvesting organs from the bodies of people who do not want to donate their organs. It means we violate the patient's right to have freedom to make decisions for themselves and against the concept of informed consent. We should reconsider this problem whether the possibility to ignore the patient's rights is morally acceptable or unacceptable. Especially for brain dead patients who are under 15 years old, this problem is more serious than for the adult patients because they often do not or cannot express their will about organ donation. Is it morality acceptable to allow for their family exercise the right to make decision instead of children who are not able to make own decision or to express their decision? And also, there are not sufficient staff to declare the brain death of children. In such situations in which children's rights are not adequately considered and the system for operating the new act accurately are not sufficient, we should think about this problem. The other thing to think about is the psychological burden for families. In cases where the patient do not express their opinion about brain death and organ transplantation, the family should decide whether allow transplanting organs under the patient's brain death state or not, even though they have enough to worry about because of the death of relatives. Beyond that, they should dictate handling of their relatives' death and decide on how to deal with the bodies of relatives. And should it be allowed for humans to handle others' life as a family's rights? Is it really permissible to saddle psychological burden for families with facing a relative's death and handling their death? These kind of questions are treated lightly in the new act behind the beneficence for the recipients. And also, the new act has conflict with common sense of Japanese society. More than half of Japanese people have doubt with the idea of brain death, and they have hesitation to donate their organs after they become brain dead. The idea of donating organs under the brain death state is not widely accepted in Japan society. The new act is not fitted with the the idea of organ transplantation under brain death state in Japan. Therefore, the new act on organ transplantation revised in order to improve the Japanese organ transplant situations, but it has problem. The new act revised for solving the problem of shortage of organ donors only reflect the requirement of people who were facing with the problems of shortage of organ donors, and it lacks the viewpoint of people who will become organ donors or their families. We must think carefully about this problem and have enough discussion in the whole society in order to make the new act better for both organ donors and recipients.